Me a cocktail, bruh. I didn't even this is my bad preparing. I might have to let you talk and then get up and get me a cocktail.
All right, that's cool. That's
I
cool.
ain't had my water today though. So, okay, yes, it tweeted out that we are now live. And as always, because we do this by ourselves, I got to check and make sure that we are live on YouTube and Facebook as well. Mm. Oop, my phone about to die. Make sure we do it correctly. Oh, it's not showing up yet. Okay.
Uh,
So let me double check real quick. Cause
it's on the Smart Brown Girls account or yours personal?
no, it's on Smart Brown Girl. So it's on YouTube now because people are commenting from YouTube. Hello,
Okay.
y'all. Welcome to Heavy Part 3. A bitch cannot find her book right now. It's okay because I listened to the Audible, the Miga, the Black Abundance, the Thon and Grandmama and all them folk. Abby Claremont. We listened to all that on Audible this go round, but I have a copy of the book somewhere. But we're gonna rely on Jarrett for this one.
I am a librarian, so we good.
Well, you know what's crazy? So of all the three men that we have brought in to speak about Heavy and Kiese Laymon's, I was gonna say Lamone because I'm an extra bitch, but Kiese Laymon's seminal work, right? Y'all are all in PhD programs. We actually had
Oh,
Jarrett.
word.
We actually had Jarrett Woods. He's in Mississippi.
Uh,
And he runs a book group called A Black Man Reading, and he came down and sat down with us last week, and we had a great discussion on Black abundance. It was awesome.
wait,
It,
this nigga name is Jared too?
it's Jerid though, but yeah, Jared and Jarrett. You know what? Your
Wait,
family
Jarid?
Jerid. Don't shit. Your family just traveled up
Yo,
to Mississippi to Indiana. His family stayed
they
in
did.
Mississippi.
Yo,
Same
Dad,
niggas.
we got to talk about that because no lie, I was in the town, one of the towns mentioned in this part of the book, but we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
Because my family from there.
Yeah,
Dead
I
ass.
mean you're from the Midwest, so everyone from the Midwest
Yeah,
has family in
yeah,
Mississippi.
absolutely.
You know,
Mississippi, Arkansas,
it's
Tennessee.
it's the Great Migration, right? And I'm from the
Diaspora.
Northeast, so my family's all from the Carolinas and Georgia. But welcome, y'all. I hope I need the face. I see the YouTube people. Let me see the Facebook people, the Twitter people. If you popped in from Discord, holla at a ho. All right. So if you are, if you who is calling me right now? If you are from my Patreon, people don't call me all day, but as soon as we go live, they call me. But I'm trying to say if you would recognize Jarrett because you have joined me on Instagram and that video is now lives on my Patreon. So for the real ones, you can come see me and Jarrett drag each other over Black academia.
Oh, that's what my shit was doing, like the Teddy Riley shit. And I was like frozen, and I had to get
Yes.
off the Wi-Fi and go
Yeah.
on my 4G.
Jared is a good friend. I have known him since his light wash jean days in the early 2000s, well, the mid
Yeah,
2000s, because we met in like 09.
yeah.
And
Come a long way since then.
he is currently doing. He's tearing up the spot. Well, you're not in Boston no more, so you in Ithaca. You about ready to graduate, but you
Nah, I wouldn't
still
say all that, but I
making
appreciate
shit
you
hot
saying
at Harvard.
I appreciate you saying that. I ain't about to graduate though. I
Mm.
got some. I mean, I'm 3 years in, so you got a 5 to 7 bid. We'll see.
7 years to finish the PhD program. You
Five
just
to
want to
seven,
make
like literally, like
five to
it's gonna
seven.
be a
Yeah.
minimum of 5 years. Like really and truly, a lot of people take maybe to that seventh year, depending on the field. You know what I'm saying? So we'll
Dang.
see.
I'm trying to
We'll
go
see. I'm
short
like
term.
literally like halfway in the middle. So
That
um,
makes me feel less bad about trying to go get my degree at 36.
yeah, I
I'm
know.
in
Like
my 40s.
honestly, I think that's the best time to do it. Like I started mine when I was 30. I think if I had started it earlier, it'd have been a bad look. I probably didn't have the focus, the discipline. Probably was doing a lot of other shit that wouldn't have really been conducive to me staying in school. So,
So we
um,
do have some new updates. You should be able to see Facebook comments on YouTube. I don't think Facebook will be able to see YouTube comments because there's different parameters. But we paying for things because we're trying to make this an immersive experience for everybody. But let's get into this discussion. So of course, as always, we go by the syllabus. Bree Reed did an amazing job on the heavy syllabus. please get it. It's really what's inspired me to also create a workbook, because we're reading all about love on the complex theory track, and it is dragging everybody for filth. I definitely sent an email yesterday quoting page 117 of the greed chapter. That section about narcissism hit a hoe real hard. Had to let a nigga know, okay? But we are going to be covering Homeworked, which follows Kiese, into high school?
No, really kind of like in the college.
Yeah, in the early
Yeah,
college
yeah.
years, before
Early
he becomes a
college.
professor at Vassar.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And
Yeah, he leaves at home and everything for the first time, really for real.
yeah, and what I love about this book is the vulnerability and the emotional landscape that we get, that we so rarely see from Black men. I mean, I think, as Bell Hooks says, patriarchy has no gender, and this is something that I was talking to the other Jarrett about the last discussion. Well, he actually brought up the point about how the performance of masculinity and the way in which toxic masculinity, we're often taught about men not showing emotion, men not being vulnerable or like emotionally open people. And so I really appreciate the book for like going into those spaces, and often uncomfortable spaces, and being real about the experience.
Yeah. He wasn't trying to like make himself like a hero or try to make it like justify, what he did and what he said. He was like, look, this is what it was. It wasn't like, and I hate when I read something where I don't feel like the author is being authentic about how they were kind of going through that experience at the time. And I think he did a good job of situating himself and situating context, so we could see him from a lot of different angles. Because when I read any kind of memoir or autobiography and that's not happening, like I honestly usually put that shit down.
We'll have to. This is another video, but the last Jarrett enjoyed that nigga you don't like, stamped.
Oh shit. Oh my god, yeah.
So I was like, oh, the next guy.
He sound like a Jarrett.
Don't be rude.
He sound like a Jarrett.
Okay.
With an E and a D at the end and an I.
You got 2 R's and 2 T's. What we doing here?
That shit slap though. Seriously, when have you ever seen a Jarrett? But that's not the end of there.
Homeworked. Okay.
I heard LP named Jarrett just like mine. Come on, we good.
Do y'all spell y'all name the same way though?
Absolutely.
I was gonna make a sly joke because I know y'all personal business, but I'm gonna leave it alone. We can't be going in on somebody that's not here. 1, 2.
Yeah, not on my line, brother, either.
I could come for y'all, but I'm gonna let it go, right? Okay. So we open Homework with Fantasia, where we have Kiese's mother boarding her flight to Boston.
Fantastic. You say Fantasia?
That's what it says in here. You know what's honestly, when I read the book, I didn't really read the chapters. I didn't think of the chapter titles.
The name of the chapter is Fantastic. You said Fantasia.
Oh, because it's a typo in the syllabus thing.
Okay. I was like, no, I thought I was tripping. I had a little bit of brown already. I was like, wait a minute.
I don't have my copy of the book on me, so I can only go by the syllabus. Okay. And I realized that we have to do a better review because there's some typos in here. But in the opening chapter of part 3, Fantastic, Kiese's mother boards her flight to Boston, and Laymon goes to the Waffle House and Dunkin' Donuts. He says, I've never driven myself to a restaurant. He then proceeds to binge, essentially, and order a whole lot of food. How is food connected to Laymon's coming of age, and therefore connected to the title of the book, Heavy?
Like, it was clear to me that when he left from the airport, dropping off his mama to go to Harvard, and I have a lot of questions about her experience as a postdoc at Harvard living in Boston, but that's not the end out there. You could tell that, like, he was associating food with a certain type of freedom, both like personal, economic, and a little bit of social freedom. They're like, all right, like his mother has been such a present force in his life, and like an actual like force. You know what I'm saying? I use that word deliberately, and it kind of reminded me of like, different times when folks just have a celebration, they just want to feast, and he's like, oh shit, like I got a little bit of freedom. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm about to start. He was feeling himself. and he was like feeling himself at the same time. That's kind of how I read it. I don't know what you thought.
I mean, I also think it's interesting because Bree positions in the syllabus that she asks us to think through if we have memories around food and what is our relationship to food, and then what is the relationship between food and geography, and how does Kiese being the son of the Black South connect to his writing about food? Like geographically, that they're like this Waffle House experience, and also how we experience food. And I will say, having lived in New York, that greatly changed my relationship with food.
How so?
Because I grew up in a household where we ate together as a family every night, and so like eating was always just this thing of joy and communion. And I think
Right.
because New York in my 20s was definitely a era of communion. I ate a lot with people that I loved, but I also was conscious of how much I was eating, and I was never growing up conscious of what I was eating. But because New York also very much so thrives on like this very binary understanding of physique and what is socially acceptable of weight, changed the way I ate. And also I was broke, so I was eating a whole lot of $5 wings at the Dominican spot. You know what I mean? A whole lot of $5 chicken wings and French fries. But like not to that would be the only meal of the day because I was broke and I didn't want to get big.
Right.
Versus, growing up, there was a whole process to how you made the food, where your food came from, and then how you ate it. And then versus when I moved to New York, it was just a quite different relationship.
I mean, and too, there's something about the Waffle House being a place in the South, in certain parts of the South in particular, that like, it's hard to explain for people who've never experienced a Waffle House, you know what I'm saying, in the middle of the night, in like Mississippi or Alabama or Georgia like I have. And it's an experience. You see, I mean, I don't know what time of day, I can't remember. I assume it's probably during the day because he dropped his mom off at the airport. But like, it's just a certain type of element. And let me tell you, I knew the Rona was real when Waffle House closed. Like, when Waffle House is like, nah, you can't come in and sit down, I'm like, oh shit. Like, this is like it is a real cultural experience. It's not, and like you talk about like what it's like to get a $5 like fried chicken wing in like New York City, like a Waffle House, you get $5, like you can go hard. Like,
you get some real greasy, nasty food at the Waffle House versus the high class 5 wings chopped fried hard from Wing Chong on Fulton Street in Brooklyn. Don't shade that shit, okay? Distinct memories, hot sauce and barbecue sauce on everything. It's okay. We don't have to argue about this point. So, Laymon pays homage to Black icons of the South throughout his memoir. He writes that we were kinfolk of Fannie Lou Hamer, Ida B. Wells, and Medgar Evers. I assume we were wittier, tougher, and more imaginative than white students, administrators, and faculty because we had to be. And he actually makes this reference several times throughout the book about, how we view Black excellence and this theory of being twice as good as white folks, because to him, his grandmama and his mom were already like exceptional, way past white people. So it was really white people that needed to be twice as good.
Yep.
It's not like we don't have to. He does kind of push back in thought, though he doesn't seem to ever push back in praxis, like, because he does feed in his lived reality into being twice as good. But in thought, when he thinks back of his own ancestors and the way he speaks of, Fannie Lou Hamer, Medgar Evers, and Ida B. Wells. Was Ida B. Wells also born in Mississippi? I want to say all folks that came from, Mississippi, that they were already, just by being Black in Mississippi, they were already far superseding exceptionality of white folk.
Right. I mean, I think when I hear you talk, I think of Ta-Nehisi Coates, and him talking about, we don't need to be they're like the argument for Black excellence kind of makes it hard for people who like, yo, can I just be Black and mediocre for a minute? Like, why, you know what I'm saying? Like why do I have to be, like the first Black person to go to or try to enroll at the University of Mississippi, like a Medgar Evers? Like, why do I have to be, kind of like what his mother was saying to him, kind of in the first 2 parts, like this is going to protect you, you know what I'm saying? And I think that it was very evident kind of later on in part 3 that like his books wasn't going to protect him. In fact, his books, in the way that he was engaging with them was going to make him an even more open target
More
for particular
radical.
types of
Yeah.
violence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Because it was like, this shit ain't gonna save you. Like, so, you know, but I really, I mean, I know this was on the previous part, but I was really feeling the Black Abundance part.
That's my favorite part of the book.
It is so beautiful.
I love him to Lathan. Yeah.
Like him and his homeboy just like Black Abundance. Like, I think Black Abundance has a lot more to offer. A lot more Black people than Black excellence does. Like, Black excellence is like some talented 10th, like early Du Bois shit. Right? Black Abundance is just like there's just so much there. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, yeah, like one time for like just being mediocre. You know what I'm saying? And like being cool with it, or being below average. I don't give a fuck. Like, whatever you are, like, you Black. You know what I'm saying? Like, to certain classes of white people, no matter what you do, you're always going to be below average. So I learned a long time ago, like, I stopped trying to change white people's minds a long time ago. I don't know if I ever was trying to change their minds, but if I ever was, I stopped that shit a long time ago. Well, I think that people starting to realize that too.
I would love to position this question to you, since you are studying cultural anthropology. How do you pay homage to the legacies of Southern Black folk? And I would love to hear from the audience. How are y'all paying homage to the legacies of Southern Black folks? Because I think there's a bias that a lot of us hold.
Well, I agree with you, especially those of us who was raised above the Mason-Dixon line. But again, to your viewers, I was born and raised in Indiana. I wouldn't really say that's above the Mason-Dixon line. It is, like, geographically, but culturally, it really ain't.
We had this whole conversation about what gets to constitute as Southern. So go ahead, shoot your shot.
I mean, that the Ku Klux Klan had a march through my hometown when I was a kid, like, and they didn't have their hoods on. By the way, they had their hoods off.
But like, why do we relate to this idea of how overt racism shows itself correlating to a Southern experience, right? Because I grew up in Delaware, which I will never say is the South, but the KKK definitely marched in Delaware in the 90s. You know what I mean? Like, in their hoods.
Delaware and Indiana is a special type of...
It was definitely a sunset town, not too far from where I grew up.
I mean...
but that doesn't make it the South. Like, white folks just ain't shit. That's what that makes it.
I mean, it does and it doesn't. All right, here's what I would say about your home state of Delaware and my home state of Indiana having more certain kinds of kinship with the South than others, right? The KKK was started in the South, right? It was started in Tennessee right after the end of the Civil War. The KKK came in different waves. The third wave of the KKK was in Indiana. Like, that's where their headquarters were.
But that don't make it the South. Chicago gotta be the South.
No. I said I'm from Indiana. I ain't saying from Chicago. Whoa. Two totally different things. No shade to Chicago. But even Chi-Town folks will tell you, no, Indiana's something different. Like Mike Pence from Indiana. Like, it's a little different. Delaware was the last state to ratify the 13th Amendment. Like that's the 13th. The 13th Amendment is only Delaware is the only state that never the only quote unquote northern state that never abolished slavery through its constitution. The 13th Amendment is the only thing that abolished slavery in the state of Delaware. So, like, and I've been through Delaware. Like, it's a little country. But
Brian Stevenson does say he's from the South, because the Mason-Dixon line runs through Delaware, and Brian Stevenson and Just Mercy, who grew up, and I want to say, in Sussex County, Delaware. He grew up in the most. There's only 3 counties in Delaware. You think a bitch would remember, but I grew up in Newcastle County. That's all I know.
Newcastle, Kent, and I forget the other one.
Sussex. And it's Newcastle, Kent, and Sussex, but I can't remember which from the lower 2. But anywho, he grew up like near Dewey Beach, like in South Delaware, and he will say that he grew up as like a Southern boy on the farm. And I thought that was interesting because Delaware does not correlate as the South to me.
No, not at all. But to put the emphasis on the South, to put it on Mississippi in particular.
Mm-hmm. So how are we paying homage to the real Southern? Because what we talk about the South. We ain't got to jump over, make leaps and bounds to include ourselves in this.
But the reason I include myself is because that to me is my diaspora. Like that's what my actual diaspora is. That's a place on the map where I could say I know my people from here. Like, again, he talks in that first chapter about Winona. My paternal grandmother's family is all from Winona. I went to when my father's first cousin passed away a few years ago. I flew in to Memphis, picked him and my mom up at the airport, and we drove 2.5 hours south to Greenwood, Mississippi, where the service was. Then we rode through Winona. So, like, to me, that's like, in terms of paying homage, it's like, nigga, that's home. You know what I'm saying? Like, so many people, like, and
you went to a funeral and now it's home.
No.
It's ancestrally your home. I get that. Ancestrally.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, but home is never, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm thinking of, like, Toni Morrison's home. I'm thinking of other people's notions of home. Like, let me tell you this. I got embraced in home in a way in Mississippi I wasn't embraced when I went to the African continent. Like, you know what I'm saying?
I mean, but like, that's a leap. I wasn't, you know what I mean? Like, okay.
But what I'm saying is, like, a lot of people in the Midwest, like, that's where we come from. Like, I grew up spending, like, summers in Tennessee.
I think we can acknowledge that there was a great migration, and so, like, a lot of us as just Black people in America, especially those of us who are invested in the history of our people, that a lot of the ways that we pay homage might be our own connection to how we place our connection to the land or the connection to the people. Like, we do feel connected because we understand how the migration works. We understand that, like, before we were from Indiana, and this is not like there's not generations between us. It literally is maybe like 20, 30 years, but prior to us, that our family was and is very much so connected to these places, and a lot of our cultural markers come from these places.
Right.
I think that actually helps the conversation, because I think people, I think there was a period of time where we had a lot of bias to Southern Black people. Like, even when you start to say Indiana relates to Mississippi because of the KKK, I think people tend to relate to the South as though, like, white racist and like how dumb are you to stay there? When really, like, what part of America isn't racist?
Yeah, I guess I would ask who we was, because I ain't never said that the South had a like a patent on racism in America. Hell no. Again, especially because I grew up in Indiana, and, like, I've seen it from a lot of different sides. My daddy was born in the South. Like, he's a son of the South, and I love my daddy. I love his family. I love getting to meet his family. And, like, to me, that's where so much is part of the reason why I got a dissertation project that's based in Louisiana, right? Because, like, this to me.
You're working on Angola, right?
Yeah. I'm doing a project.
I keep thinking Angola is in Mississippi when it's in Louisiana.
But here's the thing: it's on the border with Mississippi. Okay. So the Louisiana State Penitentiary is surrounded
because Kiese makes a reference to Angola.
Okay, maybe not in this part. Maybe like
maybe in chapter 4, yeah.
But no, like, it's right there on, like, I think Wilkinson County is a Mississippi county that it borders. But for me, that's where we come from. Like, as far as I'm concerned, like, that is Clarksville, Mississippi, Memphis, Tennessee, Lake Village, Arkansas. Like, that's where I come from, as far as I know. And that's where, that's through different lines on my folks' side, but, also through Harris County, Georgia. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's where we from. That's like, I don't like, I grew up spending summers there, just like I grew up spending summers in Detroit, and it's an important part of my identity. And I would say the people who look down on the South more so, Black people anyway, is people like in the Northeast. Like, when I moved out to, like, Connecticut to Massachusetts, those were the people who was looking down on the South, like, you know what I'm saying? New Yorkers, obviously, New Yorkers hate Southerners, and I'm just like.
I think it's because of the class of people that you were dealing with, because of where you were at. I think it was a class thing more so than just a regional thing.
Nah, these are Black people who didn't have no class, who ain't had no class privilege, who I would meet them, and the way I would talk, they would ask me, "You from Georgia?" Like, I had so many people in Connecticut ask me if I was from Georgia, if I was from Alabama, if I was from Mississippi, and I'm like, what? Like,
all right, so let's move on from this Southern discussion, because we get stuck here all day. But also in the first chapter of section 3, when we are introduced to Nzola told all the girls in front of the boys that they had to look out for themselves, because Black women couldn't count on these white folks or these niggas over there to look out for them. Word to Nzola. How much do y'all agree with Nzola? And in what ways does Nzola's comment connect to Black feminism? And how does your identity impact community building? Do you build community with white folk and Black men? And I can ask you this as a member of that one fraternity. So go ahead, Jarrett M. Drake.
So, all right, I'll get into it on that last question. So I think that, so to answer the question directly, especially the last question, do you build community with white folk and Black men? Yes, I do. Those are not the only people I build community with. But let me back up a little bit to the second question about the ways that Nzola's comments connect to Black feminism, right? So to me, that's part of the chapter. That part of part 3 highlights literally the crux of the matter in the Combahee River Collective Statement. All right, I'm not going to get into the depths of it because that's not what people here are here today.
I mean, we can talk about it. It's but 2-3 pages.
So like
that long.
when they talk about identity politics, that's where the term identity politics comes from, by the way.
Right.
All right.
Yes.
So everybody out here on Twitter and on Facebook or whatever talking about what is and is not identity politics, they have not read the Combahee River Collective Statement. Because what they be saying is not what they say in the statement. What they say in the statement is that we as Black women have a right to organize around issues that impact us uniquely as Black women. Because none of y'all niggas gonna do it. That's what the point of it is. And that's exactly what Nzola is talking about. Y'all niggas ain't gonna stand up for us. Y'all not gonna show up for us. So we as Black women are gonna have to put forward programs and agendas that matter to us. And we don't have to explain that to y'all. We don't have to get y'all permission for that. You know what I'm saying? So that's I agree with it. Like it's very obvious, right? It's very obvious that the shooting of Jacob Blake catalyzed NBA players to go on strike in a way that are they playing tonight?
Maybe they might be playing tomorrow.
I don't know. I tuned it all out because I thought that the conversation was anyway. That we can talk about that maybe later. But the point is, I felt like the way that they mobilized around Jacob Blake's attempted murder in a way that they never mobilized around Breonna Taylor's murder, it speaks to it. So that's what that helps make clear. And on the point about building community with folks, right, with white folk and Black men. So as you know, I think I don't know who the hell is watching this or not, but I used to teach in prisons for a little bit in New Jersey when I used to live there, right? These were pretty much all Black men. There were a few white men in there, but it was mostly brothers. And I remember I was having this time. So with what you were talking about, with your fraternity, okay, yes, I am a very, very proud member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. I love my fraternity so much. I've learned so much. I wouldn't be who I am. I wouldn't be an abolitionist without being a part of this fraternity. I wouldn't be a scholar. Yeah. See you making that face.
Okay.
Like,
okay.
I mean,
Mr. Omega Psi Phi. Okay, sir.
I'm just saying, like Carter G. Woodson, like.
I mean, word to the Miseducation of the Negro. I feel like most of your friends don't even read that book, but you right. Most of any
group of people don't read books.
All the doctors read Paula Giddings. All of us.
Really?
We might skim it, but all of us own. We all own our historian's book. Go ahead.
No, you don't.
Yes, the fuck we all do own In Search of Sisterhood.
I moved out of Boston 3 weeks ago, and don't judge us. There was a little party at my house. Of course, it was during the minute, but whatever. It was a party at my house, and I was moving out. And I had a bunch of books to give away. I was like, look, I can't take all these books with me where I'm going. I had a copy of Paula J. Giddens' biography of Ida B. Wells. I said, I'm giving this book. There was a bunch of others out there. I said, I'm giving this book away. If y'all haven't read it, let me know. You can have it. Every adult in the room raised their hand. Nobody had read it. And I was happy.
But we all own A. I didn't say that we own the whole body of Paula Giddings' work, but we do own A. Okay. Everybody owns In Search of Sisterhood. Everybody done. Every Q ain't done read The Miseducation of a Negro.
Four of them should own the.
Or Langston Hughes. But go ahead. Do what you got to do.
I'm just saying. I would not be the scholar who I am without coming through this. Now, and at the same time, I've had to spend time divesting myself of the same types of things that the author here is talking about divesting himself from, right? I've had to, it's not like being a part of any Black Greek fraternity, for that matter, is going to bring you to an abolitionist politics. Hell no, absolutely not. But to get to the point, it's like you can't have if you as a black man get quote unquote get it right, you don't get it until you go back and get your people. If that makes any sense, right? If you don't go and collect, if you don't go and uplift, if you don't go and teach people that you have access to, so this shirt, right? I mean, I got a whole bunch of these shirts.
You look far away though. People can't really read that far. It's a little blurry.
All right, so this is a quote from Sister Outsider, written by Audre Lorde, right? And I started.
While we wait in silence for that final luxury of fearlessness, the weight of that silence will choke us.
Right. So I have a bunch
That's
of different. That's
a quote you could send to some niggas that are afraid of finding themselves.
And that's what I'm saying. So what I'm bringing up to you is I had a moment as I was starting to read Black feminist texts, like Sister Outsider, for instance, like where I was questioning things that I had experienced and things that I had witnessed when I was like as a member of the fraternity and a lot of other men-dominated spaces. Like I played football in college all 4 years, so a lot of the ways I was reading his time in college, I'm like, damn, I wish he would talk about what the football team was like. Or I think he played basketball, actually. Never mind. But still, like, he was around a bunch of men. The point of it is, it's important for brothers who like get it, who like understand patriarchy, who understand intersectionality, to go back and talk with your brothers about that shit. And if you don't do that work, I don't have a right to forget about the fraternity. I don't have the right to forget about the barbershop. I don't have a right to forget about my teammates. That's not a, like, if you as a white person, you don't have a right to forget about your racist ass family. You don't have that right. You have to go and if you understand like racism, because you read some Ibram Kendi books, God help you if that's what you read. But if that's what you did with your time, you got to go back and you got to get them white people who are in your life. So that's how, like, but I also make a point so the main organizing space I'm involved with now, the Harvard Prison Divestment Campaign, is barely any black men in there. And like, that's okay, that's cool. Like, people shouldn't be coming into this space as this abolitionist space unless they really know what they get into and they really are ready to break down some barriers. But that's my answer to it. Like, if you're a black man, you're a cishet black man, you got to go collect these other cishet black men who are killing trans black women, who are beating up on cis women in relationships, like Malachi Hunter, who I know we had a little DM.
Who are being emotional terrorists to the valuable black women in their lives.
Right, like who are like being like emotionally, physically violent. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's something that the author was starting to like, and maybe now, kind of as writing this memoir, understanding that like emotional violence is violence. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like just lying all the time, like that shit is like, you know what I'm saying? So that's my answer to the question. I know that was a lot, but I have a PhD program, so
okay. So, do you have any thoughts on how Kiese writes about his experience at Millsaps, which is in the middle of a wealthy white neighborhood and a poor black neighborhood in Mississippi, right? And how institutions of higher education impact the communities that they are located in?
Absolutely, absolutely. Literally, you could go to any college or university across this country, look at Google Maps. Fuck Google, but look at Google Maps and look at the area around it, right? I can almost tell you, look at what kinds of stuff is in the neighborhood surrounding. You ain't gotta look at it, but just like go in close enough so you can see, do they got like a check cashing place in this part of the city or the town, or like do they just got like a bunch of houses? That's gonna tell you whether or not their college university has gates, all right? That's gonna. So when he was talking about these gates, you know what I'm saying, on the I think the north end part of town, like the black place, the black area, low income area, like yeah, that's where I did undergrad at Yale. Like Yale got gates all around it because all around it is the hood. You know what I'm saying? Like Harvard, different parts of the campus are more gated than others, but like hell yeah, like that's always a telltale sign. What are they gonna have? Are they gonna have the $5 like chicken and fries? Like, all right, there's gonna be some gates around there. Like in Columbia, you know what I'm saying? Even though they have so gentrified the area that basically no poor people live that close to the school anyway.
Columbia and like you wouldn't even consider Columbia Harlem, even though it's.
Yeah, they be trying to call it as Morningside Heights, but it's like
Riverside Heights, yeah.
The thing is though, they pushed out so many black and poor people. Like it's not the Harlem we think of.
Yeah, because they own all the buildings.
Harlem ain't what it used to be. Don't nobody from Harlem say nothing to me about it. Y'all know it's true. It's not what it used to be. And part of the reason it ain't what it used to be is because of Columbia. You know what I'm saying? So,
How would you define, but to particularly, because Millsaps, he got into trouble at Millsaps. I think I might be skipping ahead. But he definitely has kind of a tenuous relationship with the administration and the way he's treated at Millsaps.
Right. I mean, I think that, so that's in the third chapter of part 3 already.
Okay. All right. I'm skipping ahead. Yeah.
It's all good. You know, we could hop back, but he, I think I actually wanted to read his essays. I had it in me to like go into the student newspaper at Millsaps, but you know, there's been a lot going on this week, so I didn't get around to it. But I'm curious to know what he said and what he actually wrote. You know what I'm saying?
I wonder if they're published in any of his earlier books, because you know he has Long Division and then the second book,
How to Slowly Kill Yourself and Others.
Yeah, which I've read. I don't think that included any of his Millsap essays though, but I haven't read Long Division.
Right. Now I tell you what, like the way he's writing about it in this book, and the way that he's writing about the responses of the president and the responses of white students on campus, like he must have delivered some heat. Like he had these.
Do you really think you have to deliver that much heat to a private institution in Mississippi to get in trouble?
I mean, it's all context though. It's all context. Like
in the late 90s, early 2000s.
I mean, so you talked earlier about like how do you pay homage to the South? It's understanding that the seeds of radicalism come from the South. Like literally, like again, Ida B. Wells to me is one of the most radical. Like, I mean, I hate talking about who's the quote unquote most radical, but if I had to put somebody up there, Ida B. Wells would be right up there. And she's from Mississippi. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not like gonna say that he wasn't like bringing that heat. He probably was. Like if he had them tight enough to the point where they wanted to kick his ass out, like he had to be bringing something with it. So you know, like he definitely, and especially because he was a native of Jackson, you know what I'm saying? And it seems I didn't know this before reading this book. It seems like Millsaps has a relationship with Jackson the same way that like Duke has a relationship with like Durham, right? The same way that the Yale has a relationship with New Haven. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to think of, again, like we talked about Columbia, you could say that somewhat similar about University of Chicago on the South Side. But again, they push so many black people and poor people far away from that area that you can't even tell. But it's definitely like a town gown kind of relationship. And he seemed to be like saying, fuck that shit. And I feel like a lot of the few New Haven natives who I met when I was at Yale, and I never met anybody like from Durham who went to Duke, but I imagine if there's any, which is probably like a few, they expect you to kind of have this like feeling of gratitude. They're like, we let your black ass come here. You need
that
to
is
be,
the thing that when I got into college and being at a private white institution, that I was surprised by the lack of local people from the area. Right? Like I went to George Washington and the lack of like black DC kids, and it's just like, this is Chocolate City. Where y'all niggas at? And like, you really kind of the way that universities displace the people that are local to where their institutions are based out of. But I wanted to, we'll come back to the Millsaps thing since that is in the third chapter. What are your thoughts about his relationship or situationship with Nzola?
I think number one, I wanted to know who this James dude was a little bit more, because this was like a real, like, I was like, is this nigga really a doctor? Is he like a Umar Johnson type? Like, I had a lot of questions about this mysterious doctor. But you know, it was a cute little love story for different parts of the book. You know what I'm saying? That like he like was trying to clearly woo her, but like trying to woo her through like the books he brought in. You know what I'm saying? Like he was like, let me bring in this Tony K. Bombard. Let me bring in this. Let me find out what her name means. I really like that. To me was it was sweet and it was tender. And again, shout out to the librarian for helping him, because that's the only way he seemed to have found out what her name meant. And I think that I found myself getting invested in their relationship. And part of me had a sense that it probably was not going to work out for whatever reason. Number one, because they're in college, and those things end up happening in college. More of the relationships crash and burn. They end up, being happily ever after. But I think, it was interesting as their relationship kind of became more tied to organizing, you know what I'm saying? Which I think maybe kind of gets into the third chapter. That like they were both kind of taking these particular postures on the campus and being seen as like, shit starters. And then like once the biggest shit started, that actually got him removed from the campus. He's forthright about this. You know what I'm saying? Like he kind of like lets her down. You know what I'm saying? And that was hard to read. It was hard to read, and I bet it was even harder for him to write. But to me, that was the most important part of the entire book so far. That to me is like that the amount. Like when he was like, I mean, we kind of learned from his relationship with Nzola that's why this book is entitled Heavy. Well, I mean, there's multiple meanings of heavy throughout the book. But when she asked him like, how do I make you feel? He said, heavy. Like
that was a real, like, because I listened to this is my third time going through the book, and I listened to it on Audible, and he reads it, and the way he reads it, you just like, dang, nigga, like, dang.
Like he got a little bit of game. Like he went, like he talked about himself kind of earlier in the book, like kind of being awkward and like clumsy. Of course, like being fat and like how that's like affecting his relationship to his own body, but also relationship to like being perceived as desirable. But it's very clear this nigga got game. Like he not out here like what I'm saying, on some like let me tell you what. There's a lot more. There's a lot dumber men out there in relationships with a lot of people who look a lot better than them, who are saying a lot worse shit than the author here. Like he's really just like kind of putting forth his vulnerability and like letting, I don't know. To me, of all of his relationships and engagements with girls and women in the book so far, I found his relationship with Nzola to be like one of the more like he kind of like, I don't know what the word is, but he kind of like draws it out for us. And I was rooting for them, but again, I probably knew it wasn't gonna really work out because I figured
it was a little sad. It was a little sad.
It was like I got sad like when she told him like fantastic. You know what I'm saying? And I thought that was gonna be the end. So I was kind of surprised when she came back in. It's like when they take a character away on like season 2 and then they bring her back on season 4. Mm-hmm. Then they take them off for season 5. That's kind of how I felt. But to me, she's such an important part of the story, and I don't think that he would probably be who he is today
without Nzola. Someone in the youth, Serena Jade, is saying, I think he was well-intentioned, like many black men I know, but he misses the mark. I love the self-reflection, though, in the future chapters about how he harmed the people in his life, students and her. And he gets into that back in part 4.
Okay.
But Nzola is somebody that's very, very, very pivotal to him. And I do think as a woman listening to it, like it's because I've been through this situation myself where it's like, because it's so rare to get honesty from men, like vulnerable honesty, that you get it and you're going like, oh, but nigga, you still ain't shit. Like you still not, it's not enough. Like, okay, can we build on this moment? Can we put like labor behind this? Can we like put something into praxis here? I love the self-awareness, but I think, and as you conclude the book, you realize that self-awareness isn't the end game. There's still a lot of, and we're reading this paired with All About Love, right? And so Bell Hooks talks about like, what does redemptive love look like? What does redemption look like? Mm-hmm. And it is about struggling, about taking on the struggle of growth. Mm-hmm. And that to grow. And so I think that it's interesting that like how endearing, and I think a lot of us love Kiese's writing because he writes from such an honest and vulnerable space. But it's like that awareness isn't the end game. Because after the awareness, you also have to grow. You have to go through the uncomfortable process of growth. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that I land with this idea that Kiese goes through that growth.
Oh, you mean like as you get to part 4 or in this chapter? In this part?
In this part, through the end. But in this part, yeah. And this part right here where he's at with Nzola, it's like, oh, you're aware, but you're not acting on that awareness.
Right. Yeah, because he talked about, I can't remember which chapter in this part, but he talked about taking the women's studies class and like reading everything, 2 or 3 times and like knowing what intersectionality is about, knowing what patriarchy is about. But then when it comes to like putting into action in his organizing, and in his intimate relationships, it don't really happen like that. And it like what I think that one of the most powerful things that can happen is that somebody who's in college, a black man, a cishet black man who's in college, will read this book, and maybe see themselves in it. Like when he's talking about stuff that he was like, how he was engaging with people in college. Like I was reading myself, like, oh yeah, I wish he had written this 10 years earlier, so somebody could have handed it to me as an undergrad. Like read this, you know what I'm saying? And it would have avoided a lot of pain for me and for a lot of other people. And I think for a lot of one of the most, I think you may have said this to, we had this conversation a long time ago. One of the and it reminded me of something from season 1 of Insecure, because I stopped watching that shit after a while, but that's not here nor there. You know, it was when I think her name was Tasha. Was that a character? Mm-hmm. When she tell Lawrence like, you a fuck nigga, like, and you worse than like these other niggas, because you trying to act like you one of the good ones, right? You trying to be like you one of the good ones, and like you not, you know what I'm saying? Like to me, that's like
I know that is the I went through that shit, lived experience, the worst. Yeah. You pay. I can't even talk anymore. You pump fake. Pump fake ass nigga. Like how you do fake pump nigga, whatever the fuck you say that shit. Like I mean, I do think this, like as women, a lot of us would read this and feel like the self-awareness almost makes it harder to digest, because when you continue to perform badly, like and you continue, like you're wrong. You need to do better. You need to make this commitment to your own growth. And it's not just so you can get the woman and be great to this woman and be a great resource in her life, but just be better for yourself, nigga.
Yeah.
Be good for you. And I actually, I think reading this book and now coming into my mid-30s and the niggas ain't getting no better, I think a lot of men are actually in the realm of where Kiese is at in this book.
Oh yeah, for
this
sure.
Sort of realm of brokenness. And and I actually think Kiese might be a little bit more ahead in the fact that he has a self-awareness and the language to speak on it, even though he doesn't necessarily put it into action.
Right. Yeah. And I think that honestly, as I've read the first 3 parts of this book, I think that part of how I understand like his processing of it has everything to do with the relationship between him and his mother. It has like that is such a formative and impactful dynamic for him. Like that on one hand, she is very loving, she's very tender, she's pouring into him, but that's paired, and he talks about this in part 3. I forget which chapter in part 3, but like there's going to be the belt, there's going to be the lash, there's the whip, you know what I'm saying? And it's like I think that he's very, I mean, he's kind of writing the whole book like to her, you know what I'm saying? You know, he's writing in the first person, writing in the second person voice to her, and I think somebody might read that as him saying like that he's either indicting his mother or blaming her or like not taking responsibility. I don't read it like that. I don't read it like that at all. I think the way he's describing his interactions with his mother and his interactions with his intimate relationship is that like, I got work to do, and it ain't on nobody else. I heard somebody say this one time. If somebody breaks you, it's not your fault, but it's your responsibility to repair that, right? You can't depend on nobody else to repair what they did to you. That's just not how it works. Whether that's on an interpersonal level, whether that's on like an interracial level, I think that he was starting to realize that. Hey, I can't expect these white people to repair what they fucking broke. Like if there's any kind of repair, if there's any kind of like it's more about like what I'm gonna do. It's more about what me and Zola gonna do. So I think that he was very like, it's kind of nuanced, but I think it was very obvious that he's like, you know what, there were different things that happened between me and my mother that were really breaking me. You know what I'm saying? That maybe like, because it's also very like that part of the story, and maybe just getting into like chapter 3 and then chapter 4 of part 3 where he talks about leaving home. Like for I think a lot of cishet black men, especially black male athletes, I think that's one of the, again, as a college football player, as somebody who plays sports like all through, from as early as I can remember, like I had a lot of teammates who got like beat at home, and I got whoopings to be clear, but I'm talking about classmates, like teammates who got beat, like actually
Like
beat.
how he talks about in part 2 between like a spanking, a whooping, and a beating, and
Absolutely,
getting slapped in the face with a shoe and stuff like that. Yeah.
exactly. You know what I'm saying? The teammates who I had, they were wearing a lot of these scars that their fathers or some man in their life was giving them, right? Like I'll never. I still think about a teammate I had who used to talk about like his daddy like going to town on him like after the game, like depending on if he had a bad game or not. And so I think that for a lot of black men who I know, who I went to school with, who I played on teams with, our relationship to other black men is fractured and framed in a lot of ways on relationships that we had with older black men in our lives. But for Kiese, it's different. It's like his mother was that, you know what I'm saying? And so it's like the person who's giving him this tenderness, who's giving him this love, is also giving him this violence, and that's clearly impacting the ways that he's engaging with women,
Yeah.
like Anzola. But I think he's clear to like that shit is on me. That's my responsibility to take. It ain't my fault that these things were happening to me, but it's my responsibility. You know what I'm saying, to change the way I interact with women.
So when we move into disaster, Laymon's mother says she feels most calm during these really quick, destructive storms. And it's on page 137. What do you think of this revelation? Are you drawn to disaster or destructive storms? What do you think about Malachi Hunter and his presence in Laymon's family life? Do you think his mother truly enjoys disaster, or is her comfort something else? And if something else, what would you call it?
I would say on that last question, if it's something else, what you would call it, I would definitely say it's an abusive relationship. That's number one, right? Like it's very very clear that she is in a cycle of violence with this man, and is as we know from so many stories of people who've been abused in relationships themselves, as we know from a lot of researchers, sociologists in particular, who've done work with battered women. Like it's it's not so easy. It's like, oh, just pick up and leave. So I think that on one hand, um, his mother was like there's definitely a little bit of political affinity that she has with Malachi, but like she's also like she's a survivor of violence in my opinion. You know what I'm saying? Like it's hard to understand how she is even interacting with her son without understanding the ways that Malachi is interacting with her. There's so many points early in the book where I'm just like, will she kick this nigga out? But it ain't that easy. It's not that easy. It's like it's easy for somebody to say, but there's so many reasons why that's much more difficult to do. And it was clear to me that Malachi was like that he's a hotep. That's number one. That's very obvious. And he was trying to conscript the author into his hotepery, and like he was like, I don't know. I was thinking of um, the classic black parody film "Don't Be a Minister South Central" while drinking your juice in the hood. And I don't know if you remember that part where they doing a parody of Malcolm X and the dude is in the prison and saying red fish, blue fish, one fish, two fish. Nick Paddywhack give a like that was going through my head as I was reading Malachi Hunter talk about what we need to do in the community. We need to get us some land. He was talking about how much money he made. I'm like, what do you do? Like, but that's not the hit note there. But I definitely think that that the influence of Malachi was very destructive. And I'm glad that I don't know how part 4 finishes, but like I'm hopeful that like his mother survives that, because there was even from the first time he came up in this book, I was like, he's an abuser. I knew it.
I love the way he just kind of like walks him out, right? Like Malachi Hunter, the revolutionary man, right? It really gives a lot of context because Malachi Hunter is a parody, but he's actually a real man, and like so many of us can relate to some facet of like we've all encountered the Malachi Hunter, We've
Mm-hmm.
all encountered the Malachi Hunter's voicemail, right? Like, we all know this man. Like, I watched The
Right.
Chi on Showtime, and Emmett's daddy Darnell, probably less acceptable politics probably than Malachi, but that nigga is a Malachi Hunter type daddy. And
Right.
to relate to the question about destructive storms, I think a lot of people, similar to Kiese's mother, feel most calm during a quick destructive storm. That people, especially when you lack a strong sense of self. And I think it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting for his mother to be so well educated, to be so invested in the community, but still to have a lack of like centering within her.
Mm-hmm.
That like
Mm-hmm.
this sort of destructiveness is what she tethers herself to because she doesn't have to deal with herself. It
Right.
often seems
Right.
that when she's left to really interrogate her desires and her motives and who she is as a person and the love
Right.
that's within her,
Mm-hmm.
she can't sit through that.
Right. Yeah. Like, and I've thought about this since the early part of this book. I would love to see a memoir written by his mother because, like, that is such. Who knows what kinds of things she's processing, what kinds of things she's endured. I'm just like, growing up in Mississippi, like just
As
based
a
off the
black
timeline,
woman, yeah.
probably like in the 50s. You know what I'm saying? Then going on and getting her PhD. I mean, based on this, she got her PhD like in the 70s or 80s. You know what I'm saying? Like, so there could be all kinds of factors that relate to the loneliness of Black women in particular doing PhDs. The types of isolation that Black women experience in doctoral programs, especially at that time, now also, but especially then, that like maybe this was one of the only like kind of like what you were saying earlier. You know what I'm saying? Like, all right, like he ain't that ugly. He know a little bit of something. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
he got on the dashiki.
Christine
Maybe I could
Chris
spit on this dude a little bit, give him a little shine, and like he'll have a little glow. But
I mean,
he wants to be ashy.
Yeah, Christine's saying there's not a lot of talk about thriving or flourishing, and that shows in their romantic relationships. And maybe that, like, to your point about like seeing a little bit of good in a man and attaching yourself to him. Um hmm, yeah, is when we think about thriving and flourishing, I think for a lot of Black women, where does that, like, I keep going through this own process that I have with myself about where is this world where where Black women, not just I, but as a collective, are cared for?
Yeah.
Where's this world where the community is consciously making efforts to minimize the casual trauma that we walk into? When you think about a Black woman in Mississippi in the 90s raising as a single mother raising a young black boy, I don't know, when and Christine's earlier point was that the mom and the grandmom don't talk about thriving or flourishing, and I don't really know if that was language that was available to them during that time. Because we're getting to that now, and I keep thinking, okay, but where does this? I think we talk about thriving and flourishing in very materialistic manners, about looking like a wealthy auntie, having clear skin and nice teeth and a good wardrobe. When we talk about, like, if you've watched I May Destroy You on HBO, when we talk about like the society that we actually live in, our material lived reality, how does thriving and flourishing really facilitate in our day to day? And I wonder if, even for women of today, if their day-to-day livelihoods might not still mirror a lot of what Kiese's mother was going through.
Yeah. I mean, I would wager that given that income inequality has gotten worse over the last 20, 30 years, wages for workers have stagnated, which means they've gone down. And the people who that impacts the most is Black women, right? Because Black people as a collective, our wages have gone down.
Mm-hmm.
And what that also means is that women's wages have gone down. I.e., again, if people actually read Kimberly Crenshaw's Intersectionality and don't just quote it on page 5 of the book, even though it's clear they haven't read it, they would understand that that's creating a particular type of economic and social precarity for Black women. So I would think it's actually gotten worse over the last 20, 30 years. And not to mention that you got, vice presidential candidates like bragging about throwing mothers and parents into jail for truancy. Like, that's going to help. But again, that's one of the that's for another conversation.
We know you're anti-neoliberalism. You the one to put me on. You told me about the term and then sent me the papers to read. You put me on. I read the papers, but thank you. But at the end of Disaster, Laymon and his mother are at odds because of Malachi, the light bill, and every other disaster in their lives. What do you think about their final words to each other? Considering the quote, before walking out of the house, you said I was the saddest, most self-destructive person you'd ever met. I told you if you wanted me to listen to anything you had to say, you would need to learn to pay your own damn light bill and stop riding in cars with disasters.
That was hard, man.
Are
That
they
was
both
hard.
telling the truth? Like in that section where they're both going at each other, are they both telling the truth?
Let me go back because I want to see because that quote is
on page 139.
Yeah, I want to go back and see like the because that's the exchange though that the author is saying to his mother. I want to see what she says to him because I don't think that in some ways he is telling the truth. Like, but he's also. I mean, I'm not saying this as a criticism or critique of him, but it's like. Let's think about the multitude of reasons why a black woman professor at a HBCU would not have enough to like pay her light bill, right? That ain't like the word you mentioned before is neoliberalism. Like maybe a neoliberal approach would be like, well, you just need to pay your lights, right? Whereas maybe another view would say like, what are the conditions of precarity that make it such that a black woman who is a professor at a college doesn't have enough to pay her light bill, right? And thinking, stop riding in cars with disasters. Again, that's not what I said earlier. That's a lot easier said than done, right? Like if this is a man that she's had multiple years of relationships with, I think it's a lot easier said than done. So I think he was telling the truth, but like I mean, he says that we were both telling the truth, but we were both lying. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the important part of that. Is that like, yeah, I'm telling the truth, but I'm also lying a little bit. Trying to think. Yeah, he doesn't say what she said to. I mean, that's right when she like beat him. I think for the last time. I don't know. I don't know.
To beat him. Try.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know that. I don't know where the truth is in that. But yeah, that's kind of how
I don't know. I would question. I think they both had a spark of honesty, but I think the problem is, can two people who aren't honest with themselves be honest to each other?
Oh, the answer to that is no.
So it wasn't a situation where you have this mother who maybe is more together with, like, they both are fighting the same demons. They both have the same sort of trauma. And we don't really have a whole lot of the mom's backstory to suggest whether or not she's gone through the same thing she put Kiese through, if she herself was put through, right? So she's just passing on learned behaviors. But they both have a deep, unsettled lacking around their individual identities and their self-awareness. So they can be aware about each other's shortcomings, but they can't really be aware about their own shortcomings, and so they can't truly be honest with each other.
Right. Yeah, and this the next question is about having arguments where you told truths that the relationship could not recover from. I would kind of like read that question and say that if there aren't certain truths that are being shared, the relationship is not what you think it is. Which is to say, like, I mean, it's like there's a lot of couples who are still together who have not recovered from the trauma of that relationship, who like honestly should probably not be together. If that like just, you know, as someone who's engaged right now, who's gone through couples therapy, I encourage everybody go to individual therapy if you can, and go to group therapy, go to couples therapy, because if you don't have certain types of truths, and I think that's part of what he's trying to do with this whole book. Like I really, he starts the book like this. Part 3 is not coming through as much, but you could tell that he's on the search for some sort of truth, and truth about himself. You know what I'm saying? And maybe this writing project, I'll be curious to hear him talk about it. I think y'all are speaking on Sunday about it. Monday. I'll be interested to look at that.
If y'all have questions, you can submit them on the form. I will send you the link if you would like to submit questions to him, Jarrett. we are inviting everyone to submit, but they have to be submitted by Saturday because we have to format the questions.
I'll be curious to know how this writing process and this research process like really like changed him or not. Like, did it allow him to like sit with the weight? I mean, to make a playoff to turn title heavy. Like, did this actually allow him to come to terms like the gravity of different interpersonal relationships he's had, and how is he putting that into practice now with his current and future relationships? Because you can't go back and like again, I don't think that things can necessarily be repaired or restored. Certain types, like, when people take
I don't think his relationship with his mom is permanently harmed, though. And I will say, though, having gone through I'm a deeply honest person. I have a really deep, I mean, I've learned so much about myself in the past year. I have a very deep commitment to kindness and honesty. And so what I have realized, though, in being an honest person who is committed to integrity and kindness, that the truth can never be the end, right? That me telling the truth does not end things, especially because I've always been a person to tell the truth. The truth.
Can you say more about that?
Like, I'm going, like, in the breakup that I went through, I'm just a very honest person. And so, like, I've said a lot of things, and that's not, you don't walk away with hurt feelings. It might be hard to ingest, but if it's the truth and you do it with a level of integrity and kindness, it doesn't sting in the way that a lie stings. Even though people in their heads have this idea that you lie to make a person feel good, that like, I'm gonna lie because I'm gonna tell them what they want to hear. And for me, telling me what I want to hear is way more harmful than telling me whatever the truth actually is. And it's really hard for people who are invested in this idea of always saying what people want to hear and being people pleasers to actually tell the truth, because we are trained to think that, and Word to Bell Hooks and All About Love, as a child. And I think very much so for Kiese, right? That you have this mother who wants you to be a certain ideal. And so you're told to be honest, but as he opens the book, I wanted to write a lie because you wanted a lie.
Yep.
Right? And so you have this reoccurring theme about honesty and lying to yourself and lying to others that's really heavy throughout. But I do think, and I don't, I really want people to interrogate this idea of like, how does the truth hurt? And if you've ever felt that the truth hurt, why did it hurt? Because there's a difference. I think we conflate this idea of truth with lack of tact, with a lack of care, compassion, integrity, and kindness. Like, you don't just say things to be saying them, but you do say things because they are the truth, and you have an investment in the integrity of who you are. And that will never make something irreparable, right? Like, you being honest and sticking to the integrity of your truth will never mean that you can't recover from that moment. It actually makes it much easier to recover, because you're not hiding and you're not denying and you're not wasting your energy trying to fit into somebody else's understanding of you. You are being you.
Right. I always tell people that you can't say the word masculinity without saying the word mask. Niggas lie to themselves every day. Every day. You know they're going to lie to you. Like, just like white people lie to themselves every day. You know they're going to lie to us. And, James
So how have you untethered yourself from being a liar?
Right. But I'm saying, like,
as
one
a masculine man.
One has to do that divestment process. Because the default in our society is for white people to learn how to lie to themselves on a daily basis. It's for men to learn how to lie on a daily basis to themselves about the most basic stuff. Like, I'm not even talking about like the sort of like big things, but like, I'm just talking about just basics, who you are, how you are. Men lie to ourselves all of the time. And I do think that it's fundamentally difficult to genuinely love anybody, love oneself, if you just lie to. How are you going to love somebody you lied to?
Well, right? According to Bell Hooks, if you're a liar, you can never receive love. You can never know the true satisfaction of love.
And you can't give it.
Yeah, you can't give it. You can't receive it. She has a chapter 3 is about honesty. Chapter 7 is about greed. And then it constantly comes up in the book that that we are trained to lie, and therefore it's not even that, oh, you wake up one day, you say, oh, I'm going to be honest. It is that you have to go through the struggle of growth to divest from a societal norm that has always informed you, has always set you up, has always encouraged you to lie.
Right. I mean, that's what capitalism and patriarchy have conspired to give us. Right. That's this is deceit, misdirection, you know, like an aversion to being candid. That's what because there's power in information. There's power, not like inert power, like innate power, but it's something that people have the potential to move on. So if you have to be honest with yourself about some bullshit that you did, it means that you can't do that bullshit in the future and act like you didn't know you weren't supposed to do it no more, right? That's to me one of the most basic things that certain groups of people, again, men and white people, like if they started to tell the truth about their past, they would have to have a different future, and they don't want to have a different future.
But I think a lot of us lie. I don't even think I think men are more, like, men have a better setup for lying. But I think because of, like, patriarchy has no gender, I think we all are set up to just not be honest with ourselves. And I think it's particularly to the space that I live in on YouTube, a lot of these movements that are telling women how to level up are encouraging women to invest in being liars themselves, to be cunning and deceiving in the same way that men are. And I'm just like, where do we get to this point where we can imagine a world where we're not just passing on trauma to each other?
I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about what's happening right now in electoral politics. Like, all of this is full. This is a house of lies. I just started watching this show on Showtime. I know it's old, House of Lies. I love this show so far. I think it's such an important show because I'm watching so many things happen in our society right now. That's like, y'all just want equal representation among the people who tell you lies. Like, I don't want people who lie to me routinely. Like, I don't want people, like, I don't think that it's healthy to engage with folks who just lie all of the time. And when they move their mouths, they're lying to me, right? And like, this country has just gotten, like, very comfortable. It's almost like, I'm not gonna say that there was no president before Trump who lied, because of course, like, that's been part of the job description for a long time, to lie. But we all gotta recognize this fool has taken lying to a whole another motherfucking level. And like, every time he talks, he's lying. Everything he says is an absolute lie. But the thing is, he's learned how to tell the lies that white people can find truths in, right? And it almost is like Biden and Harris are like, wait a minute. So if we lie, let's find a way to tell the lies that certain groups of people can find truth in. So let's tell lies that, like, we care about black people, that we care about whatever, that, like, some people can find some truth in. But then the actual facts of the matter are like, wait a minute.
Everything gets obscured. Yeah, I mean, we get so invested in the lie that, it's really, really is hard to come back to any sort of truth. But let's take this back, because we still have to get through another chapter, and I think I really do want to discuss soon with you in his work at the Grace House, because it's similar to the work you did at the prisons. Mm-hmm. But when we come back, and already we kind of discussed this previously about his relationship with Nzola and his relationship to Millsaps. But so the NAACP supports Kiese after members of Kappa Sigma and Kappa Alpha verbally assault him, yet they make no mention of Nzola and her experience. How is this connected to the gendered violence endangering black women? And I also think it's interesting because I believe Kiese has said that one of those members is the now current president of Mississippi, our current governor of Mississippi. I know the electoral roles. I know them. The political roles. It's the governor, not the president of Mississippi.
I think that the most important parts of this book so far have been on page 150 and 151, where she says to him at the bottom on 150, I'm asking why you didn't say that they called me a nigger and a B when they put those fucking microphones in your face. And then on the first end of the first paragraph on 151, she says, "You take all these damn women's studies courses, and you haven't said one fucking word about no patriarchy or sexism or intersectionality these past 2 weeks." Hit dog on holler. Like she really came with it. It is so to the question directly about the ways that this connects to the gender violence endangering Black women. Black men getting beat up by white supremacists are going to be called nigger. A Black woman getting beat up by white supremacists is going to be called a nigger and the B word. And that has to be the center again. So to take it back to the Combahee River Collector statement, that has to be the center of where the organizing starts from. That's where the agendas have to start from. But there's a particular type of, and it like one could like again, there's levels to this. Some people only cite intersectionality and the two articles. Maybe they only cite one because maybe they don't know there's two articles. So maybe they don't really care. But again, if they actually read both of the articles, it's very obvious that what Nzola endured was a particular type of racialized and gendered violence that only happens to Black women or Black people who are not cis men, because of course we know and have love for our trans fam, non-binary fam, GNC fam, so on and so forth. And so it's like, it's not surprising that the NAACP didn't speak on that, because like that's not, that hasn't been for the last 25, 30 years the talking points of your sort of mainstream civil rights organizations. Like it's been like, like what we were saying earlier, the Milwaukee Bucks took a strike because of Jacob Blake's the horrific violence that he endured. The Detroit Pistons could have went on strike when Aiyana Stanley Jones got killed. You know what I'm saying? How the hell did they not go on strike? Why did the Chicago Bulls not go on strike when Rekia Boyd was killed? You know what I'm saying? Why didn't the Detroit Pistons go on strike when Renisha McBride was killed? You know what I'm saying? It's like there's certain types of spectacular acts of violence that happen to
no sports
to
team
Black women.
went on strike when Toyin was murdered.
None of them teams in Florida. Everybody, it was like, I mean, things were kind of mostly shut down. They weren't like, but it's like there's certain types of, no teams in Texas went on strike when Sandra Bland was killed.
Tatiana Jefferson.
You know what I'm saying? So like these things are obvious. And at what point are people like Kiese, people like myself who've taken women's studies classes, who've done the reading, like you got to put your action where your theory is. And if you ain't got no action to go with your theory, you can get the fuck out of the way. Like what you like again, you're worse because you know. And I think that her clarity comes from the fact that like this man knows better. He sat there and he didn't speak. It makes space for me to be heard in a type of violence that I endured. So I thought that was very real, and I really am glad that he put that in there, because that was an important. If he had just told that story and left that out, that would be that would have made for a much more deceitful rendering of it. So I'm really glad he put that in there.
Yeah, it was really honest. So we're gonna move in, because I think we discussed a lot. We kind of combined already with Fantastic, but when Laymon moves to the Grace House, into working at the Grace House, he remembers that he is not center of the world. Are there moments that remind you that you are not center of the world, particularly to the work that you have done?
Yeah. I wanted there to be more in this chapter about his experience at Grace House, because I had to read that part a little bit, like a few times. So for those who maybe hadn't skipped over it or read it too quickly, this is a home for Black men who are HIV positive in Mississippi, and I think that it's one of the most important parts of this story. I don't think he probably gets to really evaluate and reevaluate maybe certain relationships in his life without that. So absolutely, like when he was talking about it, I was thinking of times. I mentioned this briefly, like teaching in prisons, right? Like I had taken classes on gender and sexuality before going to teach in prisons. I had taken a class on performing Black womanhood before going to teaching in prison. But there's something about being like having done certain types of readings and had certain types of educations, and then you go into a space where it's mostly or all men, and but men who are unlike maybe some of the other spaces that you've inhabited, whether that be on athletic teams or fraternities, like they're in a particular type of social and economic condition where like they're sort of like seeing you as someone coming into the space who he's not HIV positive. I thought that interaction, by the way, with Nzola was I was wondering like why. I don't know, that was kind of like that threw me off a little bit about the whole thing about like you must be HIV positive. I'm like, what? That's
but I think, but it kind of relates to the time, right? Because I think this book was published in 2018, and the experiences that he's having in this book certainly come from, like, like you think about like the evolution of Twitter, right? That there was Twitter pre 2016, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was early Twitter that was a real hot mess, and then there was like this period of like, okay, this is cool, and then it got real dark. But you have to remember that like how much we have evolved as a society over the past 10 years. So, now we all think it's great to go work on HIV projects or work at a house that helps people with their HIV diagnosis. There's a lot less stigma around HIV now. We realize we have a lot more nuance and a lot more language and a lot more cultural understanding around HIV versus 15 years ago. Where there was this heavy stigma, where there was these conversations that stigmatized or talked down to people who were doing this sort of work, as though if you're there, you must be HIV positive too.
Right.
But he also kind of talks about Nzola hitting him, so like, and he just kind of paints it like, I ain't shit, but she wasn't too far behind me.
I mean, she was engaging with men similarly to the way his mother was engaging with men, and how the men were engaging with her. It was like, okay, again, we were talking earlier about different forms of violence, emotional, physical, and that separation is not always there. So she's perceiving his like lying or deception or whatever as a type of violence. Like, I'm not justifying it, but I'm just saying like violence tends to beget violence. You know what I'm saying? But in any case, I was really happy for him that he had that experience, because those experiences where men are caring. See, the thing about, to backtrack to something we talked about earlier, with Nzola saying, if we as Black women don't do nothing for us, ain't nobody else gonna do it for us. The other part of that is men don't actually know how to take care of other men. They ain't capable of taking care of nobody else. We're not even capable of taking care of each other and taking care of ourselves. So I was really like, I wanted to know so much more. I mean, this is me being like an anthropologist, and an ethnographer. Like, I really wanted to know more about that house. I wanted to know more about the conversations he was having, and how those were shifting. It was very clear to me that was like really shifting the way he was looking at the world, and it definitely did that for me, going in and out of the prison, going in and out of classroom spaces, having people in classrooms talk about the Ray Rice video, and saying shit like, how is she supposed to engage with a woman? You know what I'm saying? Like those kinds of things that, like, I mean, this is you see the face you make, but it's like this is this is a particular like currency, a particular language that people have acquired, and it just really, those types of, like, I have no idea how long the author was working, volunteering at this house, but those are the things that can really help you, like, oh shit, like the way I was maybe learning about stuff in school or learning about stuff in my family, like it's a whole different thing out there, and I know for me that changed my life. Yeah.
So I don't know if he was working at the Grace House very long, because he transfers to Oberlin and then doesn't come back home.
Mm.
He doesn't come back to Mississippi.
What do you think about that?
I mean, it's like when I left Delaware. No, I didn't. It's. I do think for him because the circumstances under which he left Millsap, that he was kicked out. That and this was like also if you go back to his to part 2 where he does go to Maryland with his mom, right? And so
Right.
I do think for him that the Northeast at this time holds a special place, like idea of peace. Even though it proves us when we get into part 4, it just proves to be a destructive storm for him. Um, but like that sort of peaceful storm that he can exist in versus this sort of like violent in your face storm that he's dealing with in Mississippi.
Right. I mean,
And I do think Mississippi had that at that point become too heavy for him, that he didn't understand. He didn't have a way for Mississippi for him to do work in Mississippi. Mississippi at that point was just taking from him.
it was, but I would make the argument and interpretation from reading not just this part, but just the entire book. He can never leave Mississippi because he can never leave himself. Mississippi is in him. It is in him, right? And he's very proud of that. He should be. And so I see in some ways him going for. So you talk about leaving Delaware. When I left Indiana to go to college in Connecticut, I didn't ever think of myself like that was just Gary was just like my world. You know what I'm saying? Like I had nothing to compare it up against. You know what I'm saying? I got more aware that I was from a particular part of the map, you know, compared to people who was from New York or from Philly or from Boston or wherever, or Cali, you know what I'm saying? And so I think he's leaving Mississippi geographically, but I don't think that he's like actually leaving it because it's in him. And you know, he's talking about going to Oberlin. I'm back on page, it's on 161. He kind of, I actually like the way he lays out the prose in that. Like he's not like, so far pretty much everything has been like in the past tense, and then he starts like writing about his time in Oberlin in the future tense. And like it's not like necessarily like all you know like sweet like that. You know what I'm saying? He's talking about I will feel like a good dude for not technically having sex with anyone but my girlfriend. I will feel like a good dude. I will call myself a feminist. I will fall in love with friends who fall in love with me. You know, so it's like I don't think that he goes up to Oberlin and it's just like it's all well and good. You know, and I think part of that is evidence just by how short that part is. You know, but yeah, he's taking Mississippi with him, and like you said, this is such a refreshing read because you don't see a lot of men from I don't care what part of the country you're from writing books like this, and I think for some people they would be like surprised that someone from Mississippi wrote something like that. But again, my daddy's from Mississippi, this is not surprising to me. You know what I'm saying? My daddy, like a lot of other black men, I mean, it's similar to the author. Like when he left, he like, boom, I'm gone. Like, you know, so yeah, like you said, we go back for funerals, you know what I'm saying? We go back for certain reunions, but he gone, you know what I'm saying? Just like when my granddaddy left Georgia. He left Georgia, he went to Detroit, he like, why would I go back to Georgia? Like, but he could never leave, like Georgia was always in him. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, my grandma, born in Arkansas, she left Arkansas when she was little. Arkansas stayed with her until she went to Detroit and met my granddaddy. You know what I'm saying? So again, that's kind of, you know, like I guess that kind of maybe circles back to what we talked about at the beginning in terms of the diaspora and whatnot.
Well, that's it for this section. Thank you for being a good friend. Kiese does now live in Mississippi, so the point is right. Mississippi lives within him, and Mississippi is home, and he's back doing the good work. And I had so planned to go to Mississippi this year. I was going to go to Alabama. I was going to do a whole little southern tour this year. And
Yeah.
well, 2020 is another type of year right now. But thank you for joining me for this conversation. If you want to see more of Jarrett, you got to join my Patreon because that's where all our other videos together live. And he's finishing up his PhD program, so I don't know how many more books I could tell him, hey, go read this so we can talk about it together.
Whatever. This is always a pleasure. So anytime.
All right, I'm gonna end this here, and don't forget to submit your questions though for Kiese because we're interviewing him on Monday, so we need your questions by Saturday. That's 2 days away. We
What
know
time
y'all
on
got
Monday?
them. Monday at 7 p.m.
7 p.m. All right, bet.